All right, I'd like to call this meeting, this March 17th, 2016 meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Could we have a roll call of the members, please?
Alan Bucknam.
Present.
Dirk Bowden. Here. Emery Dorsey. Here. Donna Kimsey. Here. Janet Leo. Here. Scott Ohm.
Here.
Steve Timms.
Here.
Amanda Weaver.
Great. Could we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our agenda is to approve the order of the agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the order of the agenda.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the agenda? All right, please vote.
Motion passed 7-0 with one abstaining.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you weren't here.
We were just approving the order of the agenda. That's all right. All right, next up, Commissioner Weaver is approving the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from March 3rd, 2016?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of March 3rd.
Second.
All right, any discussion on the minutes? All right, please vote.
Motion passed 6-0 with two abstaining.
Great, thank you. Next up is the public forum. This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. If you're here to speak regarding the cases that we have before us tonight, you'll have that opportunity. Meredith, was there anyone signed in?
There is not.
Okay.
Or are not. There are not.
All right, great. All right, so we'll move on to the public hearing. We have two cases, they're related. Case number is WZ-15-10 and case number WZ-15-11, an application filed by Store All Storage for approval of a zone change from Planned Commercial Development, PCD, to Planned Industrial Development, PID, with an outline development plan, ODP, and a request for approval of a specific development plan, that's SDP, for property located at 12700 West 44th Avenue. And we'll hear from city staff.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Lisa Ritchie. I'm a planner with the Community Development Department here in the city of Wheat Ridge. Again, as you mentioned, we're here tonight to hear case numbers WZ-15-10 and WZ-15-11. Again, the first is a request for a zone change to planned industrial development with an outline development plan, and a concurrent request for a specific development plan for Store All Storage, a self-storage facility. I'd like to enter into the public record the contents of the case file, the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and this digital presentation. Property is within the city of Wheat Ridge. All appropriate notification, publication, and posting requirements have been met. Therefore, Planning Commission has jurisdiction to hear this case. All right, taking a look at the property. This is an aerial that was taken in 2014, and you can see the property right now consists of 3 parcels. They're all outlined in red. The property fronts, the address of the property is 12700 West 44th Avenue, but the property actually fronts Youngfield Street, with a small portion of it extending to the east back to Zenon Street. 44th Avenue runs to the north. Immediately to the west of Youngfield is the I-70 corridor. And then 42nd Avenue is the next street connection to the south from Youngfield. When we take a look at the zoning map in the area, the property is currently zoned planned commercial development with a Mangone Office Park Outline Development Plan that was approved in 1985. Surrounding properties to the south and east are primarily zoned agricultural 2 that contain generally single-family homes in the area and a few small businesses. North and east of the site again is the 44th Avenue corridor with small businesses. To the west again is I-70 and Youngfield right-of-ways. And to the south are properties zoned neighborhood commercial and restricted commercial, which contain a variety of small businesses. I do have available tonight the entire zoning map or a different zoning map if you'd like to kind of navigate around to a different area. Here we are a little more zoomed in. You can see the conditions on the property much like it is today. You can see the irrigation ditch that exists that's on the fronting Young Field on the southern portion of the property. And as you reach about the center of the property, it actually starts traversing in through the center and then up toward the northeast, exiting the property. Here we have an excerpt from our comprehensive plan, and again, we can touch more on this later if needed. But the property is generally in the area surrounded in red, and it's identified as a neighborhood buffer. Uses in these areas are intended to buffer the lower density residential neighborhoods from the higher intensity commercial and transportation corridors in the area. And again, we'll talk more about this later in the presentation. Just for reference, we have a few photos showing the existing conditions of the site. This photo is taken from near the center of the property frontage on Young Field looking toward the south. And here you can see the irrigation ditch that's in this location. We'll talk more about that later, but essentially the ditch is proposed to be piped and buried with this development. Again, another photo of the existing conditions. This one's looking northeast inward at the site. You can see a few of the smaller residences that are toward the rear of this property in this location. This photo is taken from roughly the eastern property line near where the backyards of those adjacent homes to the east are. And this is looking pretty much due west. And on the foreground, you can see at the same grade as the property is Youngfield Street. And elevated in this portion just to the west of that is the I-70 corridor. This photo is taken near the center of the site, looking about northeast at some existing businesses and homes near the property. And this photo is taken again near the center of the site, and this reflects that extension of the vacant land as part of this property that extends out towards Zenon Street. And finally, one final photo here, and this is taken on Zenon Street near the extension. Gives you a little bit of a reference for the scale of the homes and the businesses on Zenon Street in the area. So next up, we'll talk a little bit about process. In this case, we're going to be processing an outline development plan and a specific development plan concurrently. First step in that process is a neighborhood meeting. This was held on July 14th of last year. Our records show that 12 neighbors attended that meeting. The first request then is for an outline development plan, and this is essentially the zoning document that would rezone the property from planned commercial development to planned industrial development. Contains all of the zoning details, setbacks, uses, things of that nature. Planning Commission on this particular document will make a recommendation to City Council as well as for the zone change. The second request up for tonight is the specific development plan, and this is a type of a site plan document which provides the details of the development, and it should conform to the ODP document. When these applications are proposed to be processed concurrently, the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, who will be the final decision-making body on that application as well. Following those two applications, the applicant is also processing a subdivision plat, and that will be processed administratively. So a little bit about the existing site and the existing zoning. Talked a little bit more about it in your staff report, but the current zoning on the property is subject to the Mangone Office Park Planned Commercial Development Outline Development Plan. Full document is included in your packet. But when we look at this particular property, there's a number of challenges that are associated with it that have resulted in it remaining vacant for the last 31 years since this ODP approval. A few of the challenges are listed on the slide above, but these include great visibility from I-70, but the access getting there is actually a little tricky. You have to make a couple turns, off of the off-ramps, and it's not can't easily navigate to the site from I-70 without having been there before. The ODP document actually allows for much higher intensity uses than probably what is viable. And again, that's, in staff's opinion, why the market has shown that those higher intensity uses are probably not viable on this site. There's additional development costs that are associated with the site due to the irrigation ditch that traverses the property. And then finally, the property configuration, as you remember from the aerial, is somewhat irregular. It's got some just kind of awkward angles and things like that. So run through these briefly. I know for those of you who are at the neighborhood meeting, what the applicant presented that night is essentially identical to what they are presenting or what they've actually applied for. So we'll go through it quickly, and we can go into more details if you have questions. But essentially, the outline development plan, which is the zoning document, is proposing on the southern portion of the site to locate a building that could go up to 50 feet in height. They're not proposing 50 feet in height. A parking area to the north of that, and then a drainage and detention area on the far north portion of the site. This next portion is just the actual details of the development, and I'll cover these in more detail, but I'm going to flip through these. If we have specific questions, we can come back to them. But a little bit of a summary of the zoning document, the ODP document, comparing it to the current zoning on the property with what they're proposing. So again, the uses that are currently allowed on the Mangone Office Park are much higher intensity. These include a restaurant, retail food store, could be a grocery store, bank, hotel, medical dental office, business office, theater, veterinary hospital, car, truck, trailer, and RV sales. So again, much higher intensity, generate more traffic, things like that. This particular zoning document only has 3 uses that are proposed, and those include a mini warehouse for inside storage, which is actually what they then are proposing on their specific development plan. Should at some point the owners desire to redevelop, they're also like to retain the right to use it as an office warehouse and different type of office flex space, or potentially as a community building. They don't see that as likely, but again, they've given themselves those options on this zoning document. The architectural standards in the current zoning intend for a brick or block structure, but that's not specified. It would actually then default to the city's standards. And the current applicants are actually proposing to have the architecture comply with all of the city standards. So those would be about the same. The maximum building height that is currently allowed under the zoning district is a little vague. The document itself says a 3-story structure is intended, but it's not actually specified. And so in those instances, we typically interpret it that it could be 50 feet in height, which is the maximum height allowed for commercial zoning within the city. And on top of that, we also need to note that height, this particular property, there's certain areas of the city that are actually exempted from height restrictions, and this particular property is within that. So there's a couple different layers of regulations relating to height, but the most generous one would be that they don't have a height restriction. This zoning document, however, would change that. This would actually require that no buildings could exceed that 50 feet in height. So that would be established with the rezoning. A little more of the development standards. These are not too specific on the current ODP. Essentially, all of them, in our opinion, would default back to the code, which is what the applicant is also proposing. So there's not a lot of variation on these 3 different standards. Next, we're going to switch over now, and we're going to talk about their second request, which is the specific development plan, and that's the actual details for the site development. It has all of the specifics. So I've got a little bit of a summary here, and if we need to pull the plans up later, we can. They're proposing a single structure with a footprint of approximately 27,000 square feet and 104,000 square feet total, and it will be 4 stories tall. The overall height to the top of the roof deck, I think, is proposed at roughly 43 foot 8, I want to say. It's less than 44 feet. So it's a little small, a little bit shorter than what their max allowed could be under their zoning. Again, they're proposing parking on the north side of the building and a detention area north of that. Their primary access point will be at the northern side of the property off Youngfield Street, and it's important to note that no agency, the city or fire or anyone else has required any access off Zenon Street. So Zenon Street is proposed to be essentially left in a native state. They're going to install some utilities, but there won't be any street access to Zenon. The self-storage leasing office and storage unit would be adjacent to the parking lot, and the upper floors of the building, I believe, would be elevator served. So next we switch over to public improvements. Anytime a development comes in, there's typically improvements that the city looks for. In this case, we're asking for a 6-foot detached sidewalk with a 6-foot amenity zone along the Youngfield frontage. This does comply with the streetscape design manual, with exceptions for street trees in the proximity of where the irrigation pipe will be buried. The landscaping plan shows that 44% of the lot would be landscaped. They'll be including 15 trees on site in addition to the street trees. And their shrub requirement greatly exceeds the city code, or what they're proposing for shrubs greatly exceeds the city requirement. So architecture, and we can go to a rendering later that reflects this, but essentially the proposal meets the intent of the ASDM requirements in the city. The main materials would be a split-face CMU block and insulated metal panels of varying colors, and some smooth finish stucco. Youngfield Street elevation is roughly 15% transparent, which complies with the ASDM standard for heavy commercial light industrial, which is the category that this falls under. The north elevation is 22% transparent, south is 14%, and there is no transparency or windows proposed on the rear of the building. A couple final things here related to the SDP application. The first is drainage. The site includes a detention pond on the north end of the site, and they're proposing trees and landscaping around this pond. It should be noted that that final drainage is not yet approved by Public Works, and so we've got, they're continuing to work with Public Works on that, although no one has any concerns that that shouldn't be wrapped up in an acceptable manner. The irrigation ditch, as I showed earlier, is open. It's an open channel through this entire property, and the applicant is proposing to pipe and bury it for the entire length of the property. Therefore, street trees are not proposed near the irrigation ditch due to potential root growth and conflicts, but the equivalent will be required. The equivalent required will be provided on the interior of the site, so they'll have adequate tree cover. So when we look at the comprehensive plan, this area is identified as a neighborhood buffer. And one of the reasons this is desired for this particular property is its proximity to the Interstate 70 corridor. Traffic counts have been gradually increasing over the last 19 years. I was able to pull up some information, and these are projected to increase both in the near future as well as our further out projections go out to 2030. So we can see a little bit of it depends on the Clear Creek Crossing development, formerly Cabela's site. I pulled those bottom two numbers projections from the traffic study that was completed when that proposal came in. So depending on the intensity, there's going to be some variability, as there always is in future projections. But as you can see, the impacts have definitely increased over time. And other reasons a buffer is desired in this location, at least from the comprehensive plan, includes also the traffic on Youngfield Street, as well as the commercial nature of both 44th Avenue and Youngfield Street. The building itself, and this again can be a matter of opinion, but it could be interpreted that the building itself, as well as the landscaping, could act as a noise and visual buffer from the impacts in that area. As part of our referral process, we sent out to all affected agencies, and essentially this slide just shows that there were no concerns from any affected agency regarding the proposal. So finally, staff recommends approval of the request of the zone change, which is the first request, to planned industrial development with an ODP for the following reasons. It's consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other guiding documents. It meets the zone change criteria. We also are recommending approval because the proposed uses and ODP plan are all less intensive than what could be allowed on the property as it's currently zoned, and we do believe it would help serve as a neighborhood buffer, as well as all requirements for an outline development plan have been met. Following that, we're also recommending approval for the specific development plan for the following reasons. It's consistent with the purpose of a plan development. It's in substantial compliance with the ASDM and the Streetscape Design Manual. The proposed site design and uses are consistent with the ODP, and all requirements for their application have been met. So we do have two conditions that we're recommending for the specific development plan. And that is, we've heard some differing thoughts about maybe some fencing along the rear of the property, and we'd like to continue to work with the applicant as well as any concerns from the neighborhood regarding final fence design. So we have a condition related to that. And the other condition is that the subdivision plat shall be approved for the property prior to the recording of this specific development plan. So with that, I have all the relevant documents available on the computer here. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the applicant also has their team here for you.
Great, thank you. just for those of you in the audience, so you know what to expect with the rest of this hearing, what we'll do is we're going to ask some questions of city staff. Then we'll give the applicant a chance to give a presentation if they want to present something, answer our questions. And then if you have comments to make to us regarding this case, these two cases, or questions to ask of us that we can then address to either staff or applicant as appropriate, we'll do that at the end. So you guys will have a chance to make those comments. With that, we'll start with questions for staff over here with Commissioner Bowden.
Sorry if I'm missing something, but with this SDP, why is it prohibited under the current zoning?
So the current zoning has a list of allowed uses, and this use is not one of the uses that's allowed.
Because the storage is not classified under
this plan. So it's the planned commercial development zoning under that Mangone Office Park, and it's not one of the allowed uses.
Okay. And as far, can we go to the aerial photograph, please?
This one?
Yes. So in reference to the landscaping, there's, in between the property, that little strip there in between 4375 and 4365, is there some sort of easement on that property where 4375 has access to that space in order to park behind?
Not anything that we've identified in any of the surveys. We are aware that some of those neighbors actually use that for access. From our perspective, it's an issue that the property owners will probably continue to kind of work out on their own. But again, we're still working through the issues on the plat, but we don't foresee an access easement there.
Okay. Because I was just thinking that if you decide to landscape it with the seeds and then there's consistent transportation through that area, that might be an issue. I think that's all I have for now.
All right. Commissioner Weaver?
Could you comment on the community meeting?
I'm sorry, what was that?
On the community meeting?
Yeah.
Maybe I missed that. Just sort of what the
Comment on it?
response, yeah, what the response was. I
absolutely.
know
There
it's
were
in
a
our
number of
packet,
folks
but
here in the audience, the meeting itself was held on, let me grab my packet. Meeting itself was held on July 14th, so it's been a number of months since we actually held the neighborhood meeting. It was definitely a very thoughtful discussion, and there were definitely concerns from the neighbors, particularly related to height, as well as a lot of neighborhood concerns. I think we worked through some of those in the dialogue. I don't know, those of you that are here might want to speak to this if you still have questions. I think there was some concern related to traffic, but from staff's perspective, this particular use is not a high traffic generating type of use. I think one of their concerns is, you know, if folks miss the entrance into Youngfield, that there might be some circulating around through the neighborhood. And while we agree that that's likely to happen, probably only on like the first or second visit to the site would someone probably miss that turn. And then as they've been familiar with the area, you know, I think that's less likely to occur over time. Let's see. There was some talk about the fence. And I think we're still kind of working through that particular issue with neighbors. Lighting was some questions raised. Let's see. I think there was a pretty good discussion related to security of the facility itself. The access will be controlled, you know, through the primary entrance into and out of the building. And that's, again, I think one of the concerns with the fence and the landscaping behind, which is why we've kind of been going back and forth, is, you know, you don't want to create too much of an opportunity for folks to kind of hide out there with fences and things like that. But again, respecting neighbors' privacy and things like that. So definitely some issues related to fencing and things like that. Let's see.
was there concern or is there regulation around lighting for a buffer area like this? I just, if I was a resident, I think that would be a concern of mine.
So our code is not really specific on lighting, but one of the main requirements is that lighting can't spill over onto your neighbor's property. So that's one of the things that we do look for, and the photometric plan is included. The parking lot should be well lit, but not overly lit. I can pull it up, I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I don't recall that, I don't believe there's any lighting the rear of the property, is that? So yeah, no lighting will be proposed around the.
Okay, so the neighbors are not going to see any light from the facility at night?
So most neighbors probably will not see light. The neighbors to the rear, there's actually no windows proposed on the rear. And then the windows that are actually on the side are much more toward the front of the building, toward the Youngfield side.
Right.
And
I'm
then-
just thinking on a 4-story building, emergency lights and sort of high. Okay,
We can ask the applicant that when he comes,
Okay.
We'll let him address it, yeah.
all right.
that'd be great.
That's all.
Okay, that's it. Commissioner Dorsey?
The entrance to the facility will be off of Youngfield. Whereabouts will it be?
Sure, let me pull up.
I see on the map here, I guess, this is not where it would be here, but,
Yeah, so if you look at the, I'm gonna zoom in here a little bit. Oh, maybe zoom back out a little bit. Up here at the top is essentially where 44th Avenue, this is the intersection with 44th Avenue. The entrance, you can kind of see with my cursor, is right around this location. So it's well away from the 44th Avenue intersection. There's an existing entrance there now, and I would say it's probably fairly close to where that existing kind of driveway entrance is.
will there be a left turn lane then on Youngfield to get into this? Because that's coming right off of the curb there.
They are proposing to do some restriping on Youngfield, and you can see that's what this line actually is portraying right here. Public Works is taking a look at that. I think that ultimately they're fine with the proposal. There's still a little bit of an internal dialogue going on in Public Works about the final striping plan there. But yeah.
They would do a left turn lane.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
Because I come up 44th quite often to go to Applejack, or Applewood. Applejack is where I go. And it's St. Pat's Day, so I was over there. But anyway, you make the turn and you've got 2 turn lanes to go south on Youngfield, and
Yeah.
this is a rather congested thing if you've got any amount of traffic, people trying to switch lanes and this and that, once they get to the point of this entrance. And it just, I would suppose that you would really need to have a pretty decent left turn lane.
Yes. Yeah, Public Works is looking at it. Okay. No, that's a good comment. Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Dorsey?
The only other thing is that little dog leg
Mhm.
on the actual
This-
flat map.
Mhm.
What happens to that now?
Sure. So actually a number of the utilities that are going to serve this particular property are actually going to be accessed off Xenon Street, with the exception of water. It sounds like water might still be a little bit up in the air. Water off Youngfield or water off Xenon. So they will be excavating, slightly to install some utility connections out to Xenon. But once that's done, the area is just going to be landscaped back to more of a native type landscaping there.
That's good. That's all I have for the minute.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kimsey?
I'm looking at the east elevation, which is the rear of the building,
Yeah.
and wondering what these finishes are. Is this split face CMU with, I don't know what above it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'm happy to have landed here a little bit to talk about the architecture. So you can see kind of this lower portion where you've got the brick pattern. That's the split face CMU. In this kind of middle portion of the building here, the CMU heights vary, which is one of the requirements in the ASDM that we look for some variability. These are an insulated metal panel, and they're proposing, I want to say, 3 different color selections to offer some variability in those metal panel systems. But they're much larger widths than kind of your typical maybe corrugated metal. They're more architectural in nature and a higher quality look to them.
So there's more than one color of the metal panels on the back? Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Timms?
Thank you for that presentation.
Sure.
For the city, if this wasn't a PID, what straight zone districts do we allow self-storage in?
We allow them in C2 and industrial employment.
C2 and industrial employment. And then in this particular area, maybe on the zoning map, can you point out the closest industrially zoned property to this one?
So this is, let me grab the zoning. This is the comp plan map. I was going to have the zoning map pulled up. You know what, I'm going to go online. My apologies. I meant to have that prepared. Most of the properties are north of I-70, but
You click through that really fast like you've clicked through there before.
just a few times. Come on. I do have actually an exhibit that we prepared while I'm waiting for that to pull up. We prepared this for City Council. City Council did a study session on self-storage. And we did this exhibit. So we've got a number of applications in. This shows all of the kind of planned zone districts as well as the industrial and commercial 2 districts where self-storage potentially could go. You can see this site, this site is roughly right here. There's an existing facility here, an existing facility over on the eastern edge of town, as well as Marshall Street, and then there's another application that's currently being processed now. So those are generally where self-storage is an option. And for some reason, our zoning map is still not pulling up.
And Lisa, if you go back to that exhibit you had up, it does show the other industrial zoning in the area. So the closest one is actually across the freeway in the 43rd. Scott's got a copy of it at the 44th Avenue Industrial Park.
Over here.
So
Okay.
you can see that purplish
Sure.
color. That would be the closest.
Okay. And then the homes behind this property, and this, I guess some potentially along Youngfield. So are they mostly one-story existing? I mean,
I would say
without
generally they're mostly
doing a complete survey, but in general. And then it looks like the setback to, I guess, the eastern property line is around, I think it was 33 feet, something like that, maybe.
The rear setback is listed, I want to say it.
Here it is, 32.88 or something, I think, closest to the, does that sound?
Yeah, the ODP, the zoning document, actually puts the rear setback at a 25 feet minimum, but the site plan itself, looks like we varied a little bit from that.
I'm just a little bit concerned, just building upon that east elevation, the architecture of, and granted this is a climate controlled, but I know we're also potentially allowing regular warehousing here. The architectural nature, obviously, of industrial is different than commercial, and I'm just trying to think. We know that the comprehensive plan's calling out Xenon still to remain a stable residential environment going forward. The question is what kind of happens on this side of Youngfield, right? And that's kind of the million-dollar question. I am a little bit concerned, though, of that massive, I guess, wall versus if you had like a regular office, it may have more windows and maybe a little bit more pleasing if you had to look at the backyard. That's just no question, just kind of a comment from me.
Understood,
So.
and that was definitely some things that we've discussed with the neighborhood.
And then do you know, and I can ask the applicant, so they're proposing about 100,000, I think, square feet, give or take. Do we know how many units that would be inside? And I'll be glad to ask you when you have your time if that's
Yeah, I
good.
would say
Okay.
we'll let the applicant
Okay. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Leo, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I know that this appears on the map to fall within the urban renewal area. Have they been contacted? Have they reviewed this to make sure it's not in conflict with the urban renewal plan?
So this was actually sent on referral to Steve Art, who oversees the urban renewal, and in his opinion, it was very consistent with what is called out for in that urban renewal. So I don't believe that he actually referred it on to the Urban Renewal Authority for review, but it was, from our perspective, from the planning department, our responsibility is to forward to him. And he actually responded in a referral that, in his opinion, the use, he approves the use in this particular location.
Okay, I
Or
just wanted to
recommends
make sure
approval
they
of this.
were aware of it, so that answers that question. And just have one other short question. Does this fall at all within a floodplain?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Ohm, any questions?
Yes, I have a few questions. I understand that there are some nearby PIDs. I have that maps, and that I think some of the questions, I guess, and comments I have are relating. I'll start with the rezoning first. One of the comments was that on the 3A, it said that the West 44th Avenue Road redevelopment plan states to stimulate the redevelopment of underutilized commercial land in the area. The proposed rezoning is not commercial. And then on 3C, it talks about that that this area could change because of the Ward Station Gold Line. And that's an interesting comment because there's been some new research that this is about usually the most impact around a station is around a quarter mile of the station and about a half mile, but this is a little over a mile. But there's news research that states that even with a mile away, that on commercial properties, they're getting a quarter premium because even though they're a mile away, they're still getting that because of that light rail or commuter rail, excuse me. And so some of the things I need to consider are the size of the parcel for this rezoning, consistency with the surrounding zoning, and as I read through the comp plan, specifically the neighborhood buffer area definition, it states, it talks about because of their close proximity to the city's primary commercial corridors, potential for assemblage and underutilized nature of many of these properties, these areas will continue transition from a mix of residential, both single multifamily, and small-scale commercial use, traditional uses to areas with higher intensity residential, office, and commercial uses. It doesn't say anything about storage. It doesn't say anything about industrial. It talks about residential, office, and commercial. That's in the comp plan.
No, those are very fair comments. I think you're right in your interpretation of it. I think staff looks at this particular development of storage as not your typical storage facility, similar to what we reviewed last time where you've got, multiple units that are all accessible via drive up. As far as how this building is actually going to feel in the neighborhood, it's going to feel much more like an office building in our opinion. With the other condition that it doesn't actually generate the traffic that maybe your typical medical office or something like that would. Granted, you're right. I mean, there's definitely different ways of looking at this comprehensive plan, as far as kind of what constitutes a buffer. And the other thing that your reference to redevelopment from the Ward Road Station, staff has engaged a ULI TAP study that did some projections as far as what types of uses and what types of timelines that would probably likely occur in the area due to the Ward Road Station. Most of those were more of these office, flex space, and employment type uses, not so much residential type uses, or were really seen as viable uses in this particular area of the city, at least in kind of the short near term. Again, that was just, kind of one group of folks kind of taking a look at it. But again, I think from the other thing that staff looks at is we kind of go back to the current zoning that's on the property now, and the fact that it's been 31 years, and a lot of those uses could go there, and they haven't. So that's the other thing, I think, why we kind of look at that, is the viability of some of those other options just hasn't been there from a market perspective.
Does the comp plan need to be amended?
Due to this application? Not in our opinion, I don't believe.
The comp plan was adopted in 2009, and definitely at some point it needs to be freshened up to address new situations. As far as Youngfield goes, I mean, we really continue to see development intensify in that corridor. If you look at the Applewood Shopping Center, almost the total southern portion of that is going to be redeveloped. And this site is so peculiar just because of its location, the size, that typical retail uses wouldn't work on it. I mean, we feel like this is very appropriate and does provide that buffer. Lisa showed some numbers as far as the traffic on I-70, and it will just continue to intensify, especially we're having bites on Clear Creek Crossing at some point, probably within the next year or so. We'll see something come in for that. So we think it's appropriate given the general location. Comp plan, yes, and that's why we're supporting it.
Thanks, Meredith.
But generally speaking, are there any other instances where we have industrial next to R2 in the city? Are there other examples?
We do have industrial next to R3. I mean, I think, if you look at, so the other thing to keep in mind is it's ag A2, the zoning there, and we do, in the majority of instances, have agriculture zoning next to industrial zoning. And I think that's just kind of the nature of that particular area of the city. So I think when you take it in context with the A2 and industrial zoning, I think that that's relatively common in that particular area of the city. And most of those agriculture properties are not necessarily being used entirely for agriculture. Many of them are single-family homes.
Typically, I've seen the rezoning cases come through, and typically it seems like the applicant can come through and ask for the site to be rezoned without showing any intent of the site plan. What would the possibility be that if it was rezoned to industrial and then the market changes, there's a recession, something changes, and they say, like, we don't want to build it, but now it's rezoned to this PID, could they come back and say, somebody else, a different, that they don't want to do this stores that they propose, they want to just do warehouses?
So what would the process be if that happened?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking them.
Sure. No, that's a fair question. So should these outline development plan get approved and the uses get narrowed down to the 3 that they've proposed, they're also requesting the specific development plan for, say, whatever reason their funding falls through, the owner backs away, that's approved. Someone else could come in and develop under those 3 uses. So yeah, they would have the ability to develop some sort of office use. Again, though, they'd need to have a specific development plan approved, where then we can look and make sure that the site is adequately designed for that use, that it can handle the traffic or the parking or things like that, that the building's appropriate for that use for that site. So they would, and then if they ultimately wanted to kind of go back even further, then a new applicant could essentially start the whole process over again and rezone to something else, or rezone to a different outline development plan under that zoning.
Okay, that's the questions I have for the rezoning. Now to the actual plan.
Okay.
if you would pull up the lighting plan. I don't know if you can zoom in, but go to the 4385 residential property. So it's apparent that it definitely does spill. There's 0.1, there's 0.3. I know it's not a lot, but technically speaking, it absolutely does spill onto that property, onto the 4385.
Sure, and we can take a look at that. The other thing to keep in mind is there's going to be landscaping and things like that. Trees are going to be installed.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then could you go back to the elevation that shows the building along Youngfield Street?
Do you like this, or do you want
That one right there, yes.
the actual? Okay.
That other 3D one you had, the previous one,
This one. Okay.
not that one.
Can you go back to the 3D aerial
Oh,
view?
sorry, the 3D one? This one.
Yeah, that one, obviously, that one is showing street trees between the back of curb and the sidewalk. Now, I know you may know.
Yeah, this is a rendering that they
Okay.
submitted that hasn't been updated since their initial application proposed not to pipe the ditch, and we
Right.
refined that. So this is a little bit of an older rendering.
Okay. I did notice on the plan that they're not going to be able to put trees in between the back of curb and the sidewalk due to underground electric. It looks like there's an 18-inch sanitary sewer. Why is that information not reflected on the site plan? There's existing water, there's existing sewer, it's absent.
You're talking about
It's shown on the landscape plan, but it's not shown on the plan before this one.
on the site plan itself?
Yes.
So typically for clarity, in this particular case, we had them pull off a lot of those underground utilities, just so that we can make sure that the lines were clear. They had a lot of that shown on their first one. They're shown again, when you look at the set collectively, it's identified, but just for clarity.
Okay.
We can add them back in. They have the line work, I believe the applicant has it available.
Yeah, it's shown on the landscape plan. It's just not, all the existing infrastructures are not shown on that one. And then I did notice, it appears that there, on the landscape plan, that there are no site triangles or site distance triangles. That area has some visibility issues because of the curve. If somebody's coming out of this project and trying to make a left-hand turn, I just want to make sure that they have really good visibility. And I don't see any, it doesn't appear there's any site distance.
That would be, we'd be happy to either look at that as under a condition that we can work with Public Works and, kind of reevaluate and make sure.
Okay.
We typically review that, but if there's any, you understand trees and shrubs and growth and all that, and we'd be happy to make sure that before this goes to City Council that we've taken a second look.
Okay. And then in the neighborhood meeting notes, it says that wall signs will be facing Youngfield are proposed, but I don't see any proposed signage on any of the elevations.
That's correct. So all the signs would have to comply with the sign code.
Okay.
That's stated on the outline development plan, the zoning document. All signs will comply with the code, and they'll be actually processed under separate permit.
And those will also comply with the CDOT standards as well, correct?
Any regulating
Okay.
standards
Okay.
that need to apply.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Great questions, everybody. I just have a couple of my own. Let me get to them. The first is just a style question for staff in general. Can we stop referring to Clear Creek Crossing as Cabela's? They abrogated their right to call anything Cabela's over there when they went to Thornton or wherever they went, and I see their billboards everywhere saying, "Hey, come on over here." So
Very fair
that's just my 2 cents on that. So when you're looking at, let me get the right thing. We're looking at zone change criteria. That's section 5, 3C. The change of character in the area has occurred or is occurring to such a degree that it is in the public interest to encourage redevelopment. I don't disagree that development's a good idea, but development's not a good idea. But when we talk about the small amount of change, I echo Commissioner Ohm's comments there, just at the distance for the fast tracks redevelopment. I have some questions about that. Wouldn't the current zoning still have the same amount of development potential or even more? Because we're not going to be limiting that development to just those 3 areas. That's one concern I have. Why not, if we're going to rezone it, why not rezone it to C2 where self-storage is allowed, but there are, other zoning or other development opportunities allowed too. I have some concerns about restricting it the way that, from a zoning standpoint, the way that we're looking at. Did you guys have any discussion about that?
I think you might have more history on that decision than me.
Sure. For one thing, we can't do a zone change per the code to a straight commercial zone district. And then the other thing is I think we'd be pretty uncomfortable with that. The C2 zoning allows outside storage, so would the I. And the plan development, I think we're supporting because we can actually see what's being built. And we've got control. We can look at the architecture. We can look at the parking. And so zoning it to kind of a more wide open category probably would not have been supported.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my concern is just the allowed uses in this PID are so narrow that it might hinder future redevelopment.
Yeah, and to Lisa's point, I mean, we've had the PCD zoning on it for 31 years. It was actually one of the first cases I worked on. And we've had a lot of inquiries, but nothing that has morphed into a reasonable development scenario.
Okay, all right. I also want to echo Commissioner Ohm's concerns about the light spillage that we're getting on that property off to the east. I think that absolutely would have to be addressed, and I'm sure we can talk to the applicant about that. If we are talking about a buffer area that, I understand that the residential area directly off of the buffer will have certain spillover as far as noise, visual, from what you're buffering, but I think we should try and minimize that as much as possible. And the other bit, in the neighborhood meeting, there was a note here. It's on the very back page. There was a question up. Was there any way to accommodate the use with less than 4 stories? It was stated that no, it was not economically feasible to develop the site with any less than 4 stories. Was that information coming from the applicant?
That was from the applicant.
I'll address that question to him. Any other questions for staff? Okay, great. Thanks very much. Now, if the applicant would like to come up, I know we've got some questions for you, but if you have some other additional information you'd like to provide, that would be great. If you can just give us your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Tim Nelson with Galloway. Our address is 6162 South Willow Drive in Greenwood Village, Colorado. We're here to represent the applicant, and let me first state the staff has been wonderful on this project. We've worked through a lot of the issues. We had a great and very, very spirited neighborhood meeting, and we've addressed a lot of the working with staff on the concerns on how to bring this up in front of you today. And so I'd like to compliment staff and how we've gone through the process. I'd also like to say on behalf of our client, Store All Storage, that they're very excited to be part of this community and work with you all on how to make this happen. A couple quick notes. We didn't plan a formal presentation tonight. We thought staff did a great job. I'm really here to answer your questions, but there are a few clarifications I wanted to bring up with regard to the site. Lisa had brought up a couple of the issues with this site and why, theoretically, why this hasn't been developed to date. There's one other one that was discovered relatively recently in our process of designing the site. The original plan development was anticipating doing a looped water line from Youngsfield and then back out to Youngsfield. We found out just recently that water line has been abandoned. And so our fallback position was to bring a water line down from 44th and then out to Xenon Street through that finger street there. That was, we were talking through that and talking through, as you are all aware, Valley Water is really an agent of Denver Water, and Denver Water's requirement to want to run a water line of that effect would be to pave that water line easement. We made a commitment to the residents at the neighborhood meeting that we would do everything in our power to not pave or do any pavement and leave that dog leg, as you put it, alone, with the exception of putting utilities underground and then re-landscaping it. We are honoring that commitment. That commitment's going to cost somewhere in the tune of $60,000 to redo the water line in a different location. We have worked with Valley Water on repairing the water line that's been abandoned in Youngsfield. So that will not only strengthen Valley Water's water district network of piping, but because it will remake that connection. It's not an easy nor cheap thing to commit to, but our client has committed to that. Obviously, Denver Water ultimately has to approve those plans, so it's a guarantee up to that point of making sure Denver Water ultimately approves it. But we did not want to pave that section, that dogleg out to Xenon. We also, it would eliminate our ability to screen the lots. The one, we keep referring to the issue, and it's a condition, and which we 100% agree with, that there's an issue with fencing. There's no issue with fencing. We'll do whatever everyone wants us to do. It's not a lot of fencing. It's not a big deal. What our concern is not to create a hidden pocket behind this building that people could hide in. There is one of the existing conditions that was brought extensively in the neighborhood meeting on this site was that this particular site has an issue with transient people camping out in the area. And obviously new development will eliminate that. We don't want to create a new situation where there's a hiding spot behind there. And so that was our only concern with fencing. The one neighbor that we're doing a considerable amount of landscaping behind her house, I believe she's here this evening also, didn't want a solid screen behind her house. I don't speak for her, she can speak for herself. But if she wanted a solid, screen fence behind her house, we'd put one there. There is no issue. We'll do whatever everyone wants us to do. With the lighting, I'll work with our lighting guy. It's in-house here at Galloway to correct that spillover. These lights will be fully shielded. That's a requirement of the community. This lighting plans go through extensive review. That I'm sure that was a comment that's just not yet been given to us or to address on that spillover. We'll make sure that that's corrected. There was a question about the left turn lane. This is a CDOT access. This will actually require a CDOT access permit, which is in process. There is a common lane or turning lane in the middle of Youngsfield that will be restriping to create this left turn lane. So that should alleviate that problem. We do have a traffic study that's in with the city. This use does not generate very much traffic at all. On a daily basis, nothing anywhere near what an office building or what the previously approved office building would have ever generated. We also, as part of that CDOT permit, are required to put the view triangles on the plan, so we will put those on this plan before we get to City Council and make sure we're addressing that. There was a question about this wall of this building with the masonry and the insulated metal panels and that adjacent to the existing A1 zoning. We gave a lot of thought to the site design, and that's one of the reasons why you'll see that this building was set on an angle. So it wasn't a giant wall, two-dimensional, that blocked off the back, that it does create that angle to try and alleviate some of that impact on the adjacent zoning. There was a concept that we had that ran the building parallel north-south direction, and we didn't like that just because of that visual impact. As far as the unit count, there was a question that came up. In theory, there's 103,000 square foot building. In theory, if you had all 10 foot by 10 foot units in there, you'd have, 1,000 units? But this is and I don't even pretend to understand it. It's a very mathematical equation of how many units, how many 5 by 5 units, how many 5 by 10 units, how many 10 by 10 units, all work into the matrix. That calculation has not been made. So I can't give you a definitive, there is X amount of units inside this building. It's just, it's a mathematical calculation that will come as we get through the construction documents for the building. We talked about with regard to the underground utilities, how we view, and I am a landscape architect. I am also the senior planner at Galloway, so we can talk about the landscaping in detail. I also have Adam Kester here for civil engineering with Galloway that can address any of the specific engineering questions. And also Aaron McLean here, who's also kind of our site development coordinator, is somewhat of a zoning expert, so we can talk more about that also. But with regard to how we view landscape plans, is that the landscape plan is the culmination of everybody's information. It's all the civil engineering work, it's all the survey work, it's the building, it's the sidewalk, it's the parking, it's the lighting, it's the fire hydrants, it's also all the underground utilities. That is why you see the underground utilities exist on the landscape plan. You're not the only community that has asked us to take off the existing underground utilities off the proposed engineering, because it becomes very confusing and very and a lot of information to digest. So I think I've addressed most of the questions, but I'm here to answer whatever questions you want, and go from there. So.
Great, thank you. Let's start over here with Commissioner Ohm. Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. I understand that on the landscape plan, there's a drainage swell on the east side, kind of east of the light pole that is causing the light to spill over, that there's really no room for any evergreen trees there. And we have not heard from the public yet if there's any concerns of that. But if, would it be a possibility, or I guess a consideration, not necessarily a condition, but a consideration at this point, of placing an evergreen tree on their property because you don't have the room for it on yours?
I can't imagine that our client would object to that.
And they may not even want it, but that was one question I had. And then the other one was on the grow. I understand that the site triangles in Weaveridge are fairly high, the 36 inches, and that the grow low sumac that you have between the back of curb and the sidewalk, some municipalities and industry standards, I see you have it listed as 2 foot height. Some municipalities have it listed as 3 feet in height. So you're still within the site triangle, but it's just a safety concern that I have on that. That's just a comment more than a question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Leo, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just a short one. What is the average in and out traffic on a unit like this?
We have a
Daily.
traffic study. I believe we just pulled it up. It was 274 per day trips into this facility, and it's 16 as in the peak hours. So
Yeah, 16 in the AM peak hour and 28 in the PM peak hour from your traffic study.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Timms, questions for the applicant?
What are the proposed hours of this operation?
People that have units in this would be able to access it 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day, okay.
There's a little store that sells boxes and that would have standard business hours.
But if people wanted to come at 3 or 4 in the morning, they could. If they had the code and they paid their rent, they could enter it.
And there's considerable amount of security inside the building. There's cameras inside the building. There's no opportunity that they would do anything other than what they would be there to do, which is grab something out of their unit and leave.
Okay. And then, were you at the neighborhood meeting?
I was.
There's a question, and I guess did staff make these notes up in the packet? The very last comment on page 27, the neighbors question the applicant's integrity and history developing these types of facilities. Is there any context from either staff or the applicant on that particular line?
Sure, just from memory, again, this was quite a while ago. I don't know that it was directly related to, and they can correct me if they remember differently, any personal experience. I think it was just one of those, just kind of inquiring if these guys are going to do what they say they're going to do.
No more questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimsey, questions?
I have one question. In a typical storage unit, you said they're 5 by 10 or 10 by 10. What is the typical ceiling height?
These floor plates are, I believe, 10 foot floor to floor. And so when you consider the thickness of the floors, you probably have a 9-foot clear. If you want something specific, I could probably get it for you pretty quick.
No, I'm still, I think it's a really, really tall building, and I can understand the neighbors' concern in that area, and I'm wondering if a 9-foot ceiling is really necessary in a storage area, if that space is really usable, and if the building could be maybe marginally but somewhat lowered if there were less of a ceiling height in the storage units.
The way
Just a
this building is
comment.
designed to meet all the international building codes and fire sprinkler and everything, it is as low,
That's
for
a
a 4-story
minimum?
building, it is as low as we can get.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dorsey?
The access to the interior of the building will be on the north side off of the parking lot, and it'll be elevator. You go in, you'll have to gain entrance, you'd have there won't be anybody there 24 hours a day, so you'll have a code to put in to get the door, and then there'll be an elevator to go up or down.
That's correct. So,
Okay.
so the access is right up against Young's Field, where the driveway accesses into the building. That's where the primary access is. There's a small store there that sells boxes and padlocks and those type of tape and stuff. And then there's the elevator bays that you have a key, a security punch code to get into the lobby to get to the elevator bays. And so you would have staff there during the day, but you would not have staff there during the night.
When if business people are utilizing your storage facility to store their goods and such, they have big trucks. How are the trucks going to circulate around in this parking lot?
You're correct, and it's a very big and wide parking lot. If I'm going to try and go to the. Hold on. I think I can do this.
There you go.
So as you can see from this image, you've got quite a lot. We can turn a large straight truck around inside this building. So the large Penske truck or the largest U-Haul, we could do a U-turn inside this parking lot with that vehicle.
No semis, though.
No, well, you could. Very rarely would you get a large moving van in here, but if you did, you'd need to
Have to
pull in
back in.
and then have somebody out in the street to back out.
Okay.
You would not be able to do. I mean, it would take this entire site to turn a over-the-road semi around.
Okay, that answers that question.
Commissioner Weaver? Nothing? All right. Commissioner Bowden, any questions for the applicant? Okay.
Commissioner Weaver, I was a little nervous when you started handing eggs out to all the commission members. Never had planning commission actually arm themselves with their own eggs before.
Oh, well, you know.
It's when the tomatoes come out, you want to worry.
She hard-boiled all of them.
I just have a couple questions. Just to my initial question to staff, in the neighborhood meeting, there was a note here on this last page about just a comment that it was not economically feasible to develop the site with any less than 4 stories. Do you have any details you could provide me, specifics regarding the economics of 4-story versus, say, a 3-story storage unit on this space?
I don't have any numbers for you to speak of, but I can say when we looked at the site and my client looked at the purchase price of the site and the cost of building this building, and that in relation to what the prospectus is for return on that investment over time, we need to have the square footage that we're proposing to make that all pencil. And with this site has, as we've talked about before, considerable challenges. We have 2 ditches that cross the site. We have the ditch that we've all talked about. That's an open concrete line ditch that zigzags through the property that we're putting in a pipe. That comes with an extensive expense. There's also another ditch along the southern property line that is also taking up area on the site. So there's just for the cost of the site, for the cost of construction, for putting the ditch into a pipe and that's what pencils as far as square footage. And so the project is not economically viable by lowering it one floor because we have no ability to recover that by spreading the building out.
Okay. Also, just when we talk about the proposed ODP, the uses, those three uses, mini warehouse for inside storage, warehouse or office and flex space, and community buildings. I was just hoping to maybe get some comment from you or some insight from you as to why those three specific uses. Why not make it more open-ended? Why not talk a little bit more about commercial use in the proposed ODP eventual uses?
When we originally proposed this development to the city and brought it in for a pre-app, we were actually thought that the more appropriate would do this as a planned commercial. And through working with staff, we came with what we have in front of you today. The uses that we're proposing are trying to be compatible to, in the future, 20 years from now, if self-storage is no longer needed in this community, what would be compatible to the use of this existing building? How could you reuse this building as opposed to a scrape and start over? If you're going to scrape this building and start over in 20 years, you're most likely going to go through the full process regardless. So the uses are really just thinking about what would be a good reuse for this site. And when you start talking about commercial uses or office uses, there's much more parking demand, and the site would not be able to facilitate that with the parking lot and the parking requirements that a warehouse or potential community use, the four uses that you mentioned state. It's really just a balance of trying to reuse the existing building as opposed to anticipate a scrape and rebuild. Because quite frankly, a scrape and rebuild would require a whole new process regardless.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, unless there are any other further questions from the commission, thank you for answering our questions, giving us some more insights. If you can be available to answer any further questions we might have after the members of the community have their comments and questions for us, we'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Great. All right. So now is the opportunity for members of the community to either come up and make comments to the commission regarding these cases, or ask questions of the commission that we can then ask staff or the applicant as appropriate to get some answers for you. Would love to hear any feedback, any comments, questions you guys would have. You can just come up, and I believe we have on our list first here a Cindy Beckfeld. Is there anything you'd like to say? Great, just come up and give us your name and address, and please address us, and then we'll address comments or questions to the applicant or this staff.
Cindy Beckfield, 4365 Xenon, or Exxon. I'm really disappointed in all that's been said here today. It is totally different than what I remember it as the last time we talked. The last time we talked, it was 6 people a day coming into this facility, not 20-some people a day. It was no big trucks. It's another example of the diesel place that went in a few years back, where they make all the promises and then change it and do what they want. I'm sorry, you have disappointed me. I was all for this. I now want an 8-foot wall behind my house. I don't want trucks coming out all hours of the night. I feel like I've been taken advantage of. And I feel everything you've told me has been nothing but lies. Where is this where you can change your mind? If the building don't work out, you can change it to something else. That was never mentioned before. The big trucks in and out 24 hours a day. We was told it was regular business hours. No more than 6 trucks a day or 6 cars a day coming in and out of there. And now it's all these other cars coming in and out 24 hours a day. I'm very disappointed, and I'm totally against it.
Great. Thank you for your thoughts and your comments. The next person I have on my sign-in sheet is Esther Kittering. Would you like to say anything? Just come up and give us your name and address, please, and give us your comments.
My name is Esther Kettering, and I am a broker with Cushman & Wakefield. I represent the current owner of the property, Vince Mangone, who is here tonight. He represents his family trust. And I thought that Planning Commission might be interested in the marketing history of the property. I think we've had it on the market for about 3 years. And during that period of time, I think initially we realized right away that the property would require some type of additional entitlement in order for anybody to develop almost anything on it. And we had quite a few inquiries from the auto industry involving used car sales, predominantly new car sales, RV sales, motorcycles, boats, and none of those really went anywhere. And then we did get 2 inquiries from budget-level motels. I thought that would be an interesting approval process to go through. Even though the property's been under contract for almost a year now, we continue to receive inquiries on the property, with the overwhelming interest being from the auto retail sales business and recreational vehicles. But I had 2 rather interesting inquiries recently. One was a commercial laundry that was a regional commercial laundry. So what they would do is have a facility that received probably 50 or 60 trucks every afternoon and evening, drop off their uniforms. The uniforms and other linens would be washed overnight, and then the trucks would take them out to their customers in the morning. And of course, employees would be coming and going at the same time to, transfer from their employee cars into the trucks, or then the people who wash on the night shift. But the property is under contract, so we couldn't do anything about that. And then the other one that was just the other day was an interesting manufacturer of outdoor recreational equipment. And by that I mean sporting goods, not any kind of vehicular. Definitely light industrial would have been that particular user. I actually think that the zoning that is proposed is very accommodating. From my point of view as a commercial real estate broker, office flex is a huge category and encompasses a lot. So even though it says warehouse, indoor storage, then this category of office flex is just really big. Most of the 44th Avenue Industrial Park, in my opinion, is office flex space. So that gives you a variety that could end up under the proposed zoning. When the storage folks came along, we felt that it was, relatively speaking, in comparison to auto dealership and bargain level motel, relatively palatable land use for that particular location. And we've worked together with the applicant to try to understand what they're doing and get something that would be good for the city of Wheat Ridge. And that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, I'm open. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Great. Does anybody have questions for Ms. Kittering? Okay. All right. Thanks for your comments. And we do have, I believe it's the property owner, Vincent. going to mangle your last name. I'm sorry. Mangone? Okay. I do have you here on the list. If you'd like to come up and give comments, you may, or... Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Would anyone else like to, who didn't sign up, like to come up and say anything? Yeah, you can come on up. Yeah. Just give us your name and an address for the record and your comments, please.
Hi, my name is Catherine Murphy, and we live at 12700 West 42nd Avenue. We're one of two houses on that street. I am here on behalf of our neighborhood. We did not get notified. We don't live within the footage requirements. However, we have been, I would like to say, not use the word victim, but I believe that we have of some of the issues that are coming up with this property and this building that wants to be built. One of the things is that Johnston's building on West 42nd Avenue got built because the original plan fell through, and then the big building went in, and the lighting went up, and the big 50-foot sign went up, and the 50-foot sign spilled over onto our property across the street. And now the lighting on the outside of this building shines in our windows on the east side. Head Start's across the street from us. Their lights are hooded, but they shine in our front door and our front window. This is really concerning. I can't see where they wouldn't want some security lighting, especially on that east side. If that's going to be dark, Cindy's concerned that somebody could hide back there. Homeless people sleep everywhere. They sleep behind my house down in the creek. Just concerned. I would like to know if the sign is going to be the 50-foot limit or if it's going to be a monument sign, because that 50-foot sign is going to shine in everybody's backyards. Can't help it. The other thing is that the 24-hour access with that kind of traffic, I mean, I know most people don't move at 2 o'clock in the morning, but some people do. And that's ridiculous. There's a lot of storage units that aren't open after 9 o'clock at night. They just don't allow it. The one that's over there by Abner's and Edwards, right across the street, that's a public storage. I understand that, but they aren't open after a certain time. You can't get into your storage unit. So these are all things that I think that the city has an obligation to consider. This is a really old established neighborhood, and we all want to keep our houses nice. We try to. And we try to watch out for each other. And I really am for this building, but it's huge. I saw that picture and I'm going, wow, reality is setting in. It's huge. And I think these other things need to be addressed and be taken into consideration. And I don't blame Cindy if she wanted a 10-foot wall. But there are things that we're concerned about. And I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Before I ask a few questions to staff and the applicant, would anyone else like to give any comments or testimony? Okay. Just to Ms. Murphy's question about signage, maybe the applicant could answer some questions. Monument sign versus on on building signage, and address those concerns as far as total square footage of signage. I know that you would obviously intend to comply with the sign code, but could you get perhaps more specific?
We have not done a sign plan for this building yet, or we'd have images to show you, but it would be building mounted signs, and would be, I'm sure, to what we're allowed to do within the existing sign code.
And again, from what I recall in the SDP, you're talking about signage specific to the west side, basically the interstate facing side of the building.
Correct, yes.
You're not intending any signage on the northeast facing side or the southwest facing side there?
As as I said, we haven't done a sign, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense to face the sign east over the residences or south. That north facing 44th, absolutely, I could see that, and the west side of the building facing I-78, I could see your two big opportunities for signage.
All right. Yeah.
Clarifying question on that signage, just for staff. Because this fronts on interstate, CDOT, isn't there something in the sign code that signs can be taller? I'm just wondering what that limit is.
Sure, so if you're within a quarter mile of the interstate, you're allowed to have a 50-foot tall sign, and the size of the sign is related to the size of the building. I was just pulling up the sign code itself. So for a wall sign, they would be allowed to have a sign that on the walls that front Youngfield, as well as likely that northern elevation due to the 44th frontage, but then nothing on the rear or nothing on the south side. The freestanding sign, I want to get to that. Make sure I covered everything on the, I'm in the wrong section. So 50-foot height if you're within a quarter mile of the interstate. There's deeper setbacks though. And then again, there's some residential, setbacks next to residential, things like that. There's a lot of considerations on the freestanding sign.
Okay. Let's see. Well, we've got the applicant up. Any other questions related to the comments that we've heard that we might want to address the applicant that I might be forgetting? Mr. Ohm?
Yeah, I have one. So for the lights, will the lights have full cutoff?
They'd be full cutoff lights, and they'd be, and with the exception of where there's an error on the lighting plan where you're showing spillover, we'll get that corrected, but they'd be full cutoff lights.
Okay, thank you. Maybe you could, I understand what full cutoff is, but maybe you could kind of explain what the full cutoff is.
There's an image on I can probably go to that plan. There's an image on the lighting plan.
Sheet 8.
Actually, it doesn't show on the little detail to the right, but there's a shield that gets placed on the light that doesn't allow any direct visibility into that into where the light source is or the light bulb, and so that's what dictates and that's what defines the photometric plan. So all these little dots that you can see on this plan are actually numbers or or light candle numbers of where it's shining the light, and when the computer generated model shows that shield correctly, it'll show exactly where the light stops, where you can't see that source of that light bulb, and obviously we may need to shift that street light to the west a little bit to get that spillover.
Okay. Is that good? Commissioner Leo?
Has any thought been given to lights that are just come on during motion so that they wouldn't be on the entire dark period of time?
There is the ability to have, I believe there's a minimum safety requirement for the parking lot of a minimum safe light, so no different than a commercial building that is closed for business. Half the lights go off, or the lights get reduced in nature. I believe there is a minimum foot candle we're required to have for safety 24 hours a day, and that's certainly something we can look into. And I don't think we want motion sensor. I think we want it more on a time basis. I'm speaking hypothetically, but whereas at 9 o'clock at night they dim down to that lower level.
Okay, thank you.
Just to remind the commission, this is a plan development application. You do have flexibility as far as conditions with development standards, something to consider.
Certainly. Yep, Commissioner Ohm.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. So just to confirm, the xenon axis, that's not even a fire axis, correct? That's just going to be like native grass.
We made a commitment to the community that we did not want to pave that, did not want to use that as access whatsoever. So that's what we're holding true to.
Is that going to be fenced or bollards?
Right now, it's it's not cut off at all. We can look and work with the city on if we need to put bollards in that location. It wouldn't be any more inviting in the proposed condition than it is today for driving vehicles on. But if we want to bollard it, that would be something we could look into.
Because you will have a fence somewhere to keep people out, correct? I didn't understand if that was going to be at the driveway or if that was going to be further in along the main fence
No,
going
the
north
site
south.
is not fenced in at all. We have a fence along the southern property
Okay.
and a little bit around the southern corner because of there's a ditch that has rights to it along the south property line prohibiting us from doing the multi-layered landscaping. And so there's a fence there. And other than that, we were not intending on doing fencing. If the one neighbor that you heard speak tonight would like a fence along her property, we'd be more than happy to put that there. But that was the only fencing. So there would be no obstruction or fence prohibiting traffic or people walking around the site. This is not an outdoor storage area where we need to fence in the entire thing. All the security is in the building.
And that's the other question, last question I wanted to ask you is, unlike a traditional outdoor one where you have people opening up the gates and then slaying them down, what is the perceived noise? I'm guessing that somebody pulls into the parking lot, closes the door, and then they open a small door or larger door to get inside the building.
Yeah, there is no outdoor garage doors.
Right.
You'd punch your code in. You'd probably go into the storage, grab one of the carts, wheel that out to your car, get whatever you want to put in your storage unit, and wheel it in the elevator. And everything's internal to the building. So other than car doors closing, we did discuss truck traffic in the neighborhood meeting. If you look on page 26 of your neighborhood comments, I believe the statement that we made at the neighborhood meeting that we did not believe we'd have any more than one truck there at any given point in time, and that would be the rarity that you'd have. I'm not saying that you'd always have a truck there, but you'd never have more than one there on a Saturday. The big moving day is obviously the end of the month on the weekend, the last weekend of the month. But I mean, in that case, you'd have the rolling door of the back of that truck. But mostly this is the clientele are office users that are storing their business records here, and they need to go in and get a file or drop off file boxes and take them up there. The eBay sales users that store all their, like when you go on Amazon and buy a book, and you're buying it from a lot of these users are storing that type of merchandise in these units, and then once a day they go to their storage unit, get whatever people bought over the internet, pick it up, go take it to the UPS ship place, package it up, and send it out. Those are the uses we're talking about here. The traditional, and we could provide these numbers for the city if they'd want it, but the traditional storing your sofas and grandma's furniture in this unit, these buildings are not that conducive to that. They generally go to the units across the street where you have the roll-up doors, because you can pull your truck up right out of your roll-up door and stack furniture in there. It's not as easy to put a couch in an elevator and take it up to the fourth floor. So. And
then the last question I have is there a gate coming off Youngfield?
There's not, no.
Is that typical? I just wondered, because otherwise could a weary truck driver just pull into the parking lot for the night and camp out?
Well, that's why we want that low minimum security lighting during the evening, and then there's some 27, 28 cameras around this facility. If that was taking place, it would be a simple call to the police station to have them removed. That would be no different than if a weary truck driver pulled onto Xenon Street and parked there and slept, or wherever, Youngsfield or whatever. This is not going to be an easy parking lot for a big truck to get into, so it will not be conducive to that type of use.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Dorsey.
The small shop that you're going to have that's going to sell boxes and whatever, is that also going to be the leasing office?
Yes.
So that office will be open 8 hours a day?
I don't know exactly, but standard,
Right.
6 hours.
Okay.
8 in the morning till 6 at night or.
So they'll be handling the tenant issues and all? Okay, very good.
Just one question that your comment brought up in my mind. These 27 security cameras, can you tell me a little bit about their placement? I have some concerns about this being a buffer, kind of buffer area between the interstate and residential areas. Can you give us some assurances as far as neighboring properties and their privacy?
Again, we're in the early stages of that type of design. We could provide that plan once established to staff to review to make sure that we are honoring privacies. But I'm assuming we'll want to have security coverage around the perimeter of the building and in the parking lot, and then obviously throughout the building, inside of the building. But we'll make sure that that's done appropriately so that it's not invading anybody's privacy. We've got a landscape yard to the south of us. And then the 2 homes immediately to the, or 3 homes immediately to the east of us. We will make sure that camera placement is appropriate for not invading anybody's privacy.
Yeah, I usually wouldn't get so specific, something like this, but since this is adjacent to those residential areas, I just have some concerns about that with this type of development. All right, well, if there are no other questions, no other comments from the public, I'll go ahead and close that portion of our case hearing and leave it to us to come up with some motions, have some discussions about both of these cases before us.
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, since there's 2, applications here, can we just clarify the process or the procedure? Sure. In what order? And then if the first one doesn't go, is it worth a vote on the second one?
Yeah, it's my understanding, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong here, that we would make a motion and vote on the first case to the zone change question, and if that passes, we would then move on to the SDP case. If the first case fails in a vote, I think the second one would be moot. I don't know. We wouldn't even continue it, would we? No. Okay. So yeah, the first thing we should talk about is that that zone change from PCD to PID, and talk about the merits of that, the issues surrounding that, and then after we made the motion and voted on that, one way or the other, then we can address the SDP case.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
All right. So for just the zone change, we're not having the discussion around the fences or the lighting, or that's all the secondary issue?
Yeah.
Okay. Then I'd like to say that I think I like the zone change because it's limiting what could be something much more industrial there. I do think there's a lot of discussion we have to have about the second one regarding the impact on the neighborhood. But as a buffer, going back to the comprehensive plan, because I think the issue that was brought up around what these types of storage is used for, as a small business owner, I utilize that kind of space in that kind of way, and having a lot of experience storing things, but not being your typical drive up the truck, but storing office documents. I think in our minds, we have to make the separation between the 2 types of storage areas. And this to me is much more compatible with a buffer region, with having an interstate on one side and a residential area on another side. I'm not fond of the height of, well, we can talk about that in a little bit, but to me, the zoning seems like a reasonable buffer because the commercial, as we've seen around the corner, is too stark, and there have been some issues around the signage height and a few other things. So I would be in support of the motion, of the zone change, is what I'm going to say. Thanks for listening.
Yeah?
I think I initially had some concerns over meeting the comp plan, the intent of the neighborhood buffer, and trying to follow that. But given that this is very specific, I feel much more comfortable with this. I understand that this site has the height and density exemption. This, and the staff can correct me, but this building could be much, much taller. I see a lot of potential for not just this building, but the site, as because the height and density has been lifted, it's next to the interstate. There could be a much bigger, much more usage on this site than what is proposed. And so trying to think about, if I was living here, what are the possible scenarios that can happen? I guess, the fact that, let's just say if the building had no security cameras in the back, is that a good or bad thing? I'm probably leaning towards, I think the security cameras are probably a good thing as long as they don't invade privacy. Because you are next to the I-70, that's probably a good thing that there will be a lot of security around this particular area, as some other types of uses probably don't have as much security, commercial, that kind of. So I think I'm definitely more in favor of this going towards the planned industrial development with the storage. And it's I think if it was just a typical outdoor storage, I would not be in favor of this.
Mr. Timms?
So in my analysis, I kind of look at that side, and I look at what has or hasn't transpired on that side and also in the area, and what is occurring within the neighborhood, I think is important. I know that the current market conditions right now, to Ms. Kettering's point, it's a hot industrial market right now throughout the Denver metro area, and Jefferson County is running out of land in general, especially for industrial land. That being said, I have some strong concerns with introducing an industrial land use on this side of the interstate where it previously hasn't traditionally been. And in my experience, industrial and residential isn't a very good neighbor, especially in a suburban environment. If we were talking about, the River North neighborhood in Denver, where you have an old industrial area that's transforming, that's different. But typically, I've found that over time, the industrial will take over the residential area in suburban areas such as this, even with those transition. So I can't get over that introducing of industrial, whether it be a mini storage, whether it be a regular warehouse. Because of that, I will not be in favor of the zone change.
Any other comments? Anybody? All right. I'd like to echo Commissioner Timms' concerns. The thing in my mind, just when we're talking about this zone change, the concern I have is this is a buffer zone, and I understand there's a lot of give and take in a buffer zone. There are a lot of variables that we have to consider, but I am concerned about the industrial aspect of it, no matter how light it is. And I do acknowledge Ms. Kettering's point that this is relatively the proposed use in the SDP on the SDP side of this, which we're not really talking about yet, is a lot lighter than, say, what would be allowed under the current zone, something like a car dealership or an RV dealership. The impacts there might be higher, but it really gives me pause. So I have some concerns. If there's no other discussion, I'd like to entertain a motion one way or the other on the zone change case.
I'll make a motion then. Okay. So I'm going to recommend denial of case number WZ-15-10, a request for approval of a zone change from planned commercial development to planned industrial development with an outline development plan for property located at 12,700 West 44th Avenue for the following reasons. Number one, the proposal is not consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other guiding documents by introducing industrial into a non-industrial area. And number two, it will have a significant adverse effect on properties in the neighborhood through incompatible performance standards and architecture associated with industrial uses.
Do we have a second? Okay. Any discussion on the motion ahead before us? All right. So I'll call for a vote. A positive vote is a vote in favor of the motion, which is recommending denial. All right. Okay. With that understood, please vote.
So we have a tie.
It appears we do.
It appears we do. So at this point, the motion, nothing has happened with the motion. We would look for a positive motion to see if we get any traction on that.
Okay. Thanks for the suggestion. Anyone want to offer up a positive motion?
I'll change mine to a positive.
You'll have to go ahead and make a motion.
I make a motion to change my vote.
Well, yeah, you have to introduce a new motion. The motion to approve that option A on the staff report.
Okay.
Whatever conditions you want to make there.
How about this one?
So what we're doing here is, since we're deadlocked on the motion recommending denial, Commissioner Ohm is offering to put forth a motion to recommend approval.
That's not what he did.
Well, I think he's indicated maybe he's had a change of heart, but we can't just say, well, all right, we'll just redo the vote. I think what we're going to do is just
I'll make the motion.
Introduce a new motion.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce a new motion. I recommend approval of case number WZ-15-10, a request for approval of a zone change from planned commercial development to planned industrial development with an outline development plan for property located at 12700 West 44th Avenue for the following reasons. The proposal is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and other guiding documents. The proposal meets the zone change criteria. Proposed uses in ODP plan are all less intensive than what would be allowed on the property currently and will serve as a neighborhood buffer. All requirements for an outline development plan have been met.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion of the motion? All right, I'll call for a vote with the understanding that a affirmative vote is recommending approval. All right, so let's vote. All right. Well, there we go. Any more bright ideas?
Once
Where does that leave us?
This happened about 15 years ago, where we had a situation, a property north of the freeway related to a car use, and we could not get off dead center, and we went to city council with no recommendation.
Yeah. Well, in the 6 years or so I've been on the commission, I've never encountered a deadlock. So this is unusual. Well, yeah, we have no motion in the affirmative or the denial. Yes?
One other thought, if there's any particular area that you guys have general concerns over with this particular zone change, even the category that we're zoning it to planned industrial, there's some options that you could look at as far as allowed uses, some of the development standards that are proposed, if you'd like to maybe discuss to see if there's any wiggle room, and any of you have concerns over, one or two of the particular standards, you could approach that type of a discussion as well.
To Lisa's point, so it's like, yeah, you know what, I would support this if they couldn't have a 50-foot high sign. We can look at those general development standards.
I would.
And then, of course, the applicant may not accept those, but.
I would think though, wouldn't we then, we could have that conversation with you here before we, move on to our other business, but wouldn't you then have to come back to us with a new recommendation? I mean, we can't just sit here and say, well, you know what, let's just rezone it agricultural. That's what I feel like doing. Can we just do, I mean, isn't there a process for if we, we're deadlocked both ways here, so.
Another option would be for the applicant to request a continuance. So we could go back and try to massage some of the issues that we've got at hand. They might not be willing to do that, but that might be a suggestion if they were willing. As far as your question about the specific development plan, yes, we're actually looking at the site plan, the building architecture, but the ODP sets the development standard. So as an example, right now you're saying, oh, the maximum height is 50 feet. You could change that, make a recommendation to change that development standard to be 30 feet. Okay? Or the buffer areas, the width of the perimeter setbacks. Again, the sign standards.
Okay, let's consider those options. I'm willing to entertain any ideas you guys might have. Is that how you like to
Well,
proceed?
all I want to do is make a
Proceed.
comment. We are, on this zone change, the way I'm looking at it is we're downsizing the zoning. Even though it says industrial, in all sense of the word, industrial is not what we're looking at. I mean, we're not looking at a hotel motel, we're not looking at a car dealer, used car lot, which I've had. We're not looking at a grocery store, which I've had, which has a lot more impact traffic-wise than what we are looking at here. I mean, we're looking at really a downsize, and the specific use is even downsized more than what could be allowed here. I mean, other than one huge warehouse with roll-up doors on Kipling or someplace on the site that you'd be backing semis into. I think the zoning is being downsized, I think. I don't think we're kicking anybody on that. I mean, it's, I think it's a good thing to have that industrial rather than the way it's zoned at this point where you could have multiple things. You could have a drive-in movie probably. I mean, if the neighbors wanted to complain about the glare. Bowling alley, I don't know, I would just, that's my comment.
Perhaps it might be appropriate to take a 10-minute break, let the applicant consider what is on the table, and let you guys think about it a little bit.
Yeah. Commissioner Weaver?
You can.
Yeah, I think we can. All right. We'll have a 10-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 9:05.
Remember, you're not supposed to make any decisions. That has to all be done publicly.
Yeah, no decisions, but
Discuss options.
let's just take a break. Thank you. Okay. Thanks for taking a break. Hope everybody had a chance to stretch their legs. Going to resume our hearing on these cases. The first thing I would like to ask the applicant is if they would be willing to consider a 4-week continuance to maybe develop more information that might help us to make a decision.
If that's the desire of the board, we were talking about it being on April 7th.
April 7th is the next regularly scheduled planning commission hearing, which I believe that gives us, there's 5 Thursdays. So between staff and the applicant, that gives us 3 weeks to maybe take a look at some of these. We can also have more conversations with the neighborhood and maybe refine some of the concerns and be able to address better some of your concerns on this application.
Great. I just think in the best interests of the community and the applicant and staff and us, we just need more information if we're going to be moved one way or the other. I think we don't have any other movement here on our end. If we had to make a decision now, we'd probably just send it to council with no recommendation one way or the other. So I think a continuance would be in order if you're willing to do that.
We're willing to do that, and I don't have a right to ask this.
Sure.
But if there's any specific items that you'd like us to bring back, we'd love to make a list. So.
I was going to ask the same thing. I mean, we've been taking notes.
Yeah.
We've got the minutes. But if there are specific concerns you have related to the zoning, if you want to maybe reiterate those now for us, or
yeah, I think, let's see, procedurally, do we need to make a motion for continuance? Yes, okay, so first thing I'd like to do is entertain a motion on a continuance, please, for this, for both of these cases.
I move to continue.
Second.
Case number,
Oh, hold on. You want to continue both cases?
yes, do I have to say the case numbers? I move to continue both cases.
Right.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the continuance motion? All right, let's vote for or against the continuance, please.
Motion carried 8-0.
We're not tied. All
We
right.
agreed on something tonight.
Okay. With that in order, what I'd like to do is just go around here and see if we have specific concerns that we can direct to staff that we might want addressed, or more requests for more information. And I'll start over here with Commissioner Bowden.
Sure. So I do see these two decisions as connected. I don't think we'd be here talking about a zone change if it weren't for the proposed site development. And to me, I understand it is a buffer zone, and I understand a little bit that the economics say that it has to be 4 stories, 50 feet tall. But I don't think that we're taking enough consideration into conforming with the surrounding neighborhood, mostly the proximity to the residents who are close by. That's why I made my decision.
Commissioner Weaver.
I think for me, though, I'm for the zone change. My concern has more to do with the connection with the neighborhood. I agree with one of the comments about what has happened in 42nd area, and there's just been some not okay things between the commercial and industrial things happening over there and the residents there. And I think the concern that it's taking over what are some really solid, wonderful residential areas, like it should be a buffer, not a conversion. Does that make sense? And it feels like some of the, not this one, but some of the other ones have acted like more conversion. And that's my hesitancy with being super excited.
Okay. Commissioner Dorsey, comments for staff?
Well, I like the project. I think the zone change is a good thing for that particular site. If this was 10 square blocks and we were to change it to industrial, I would have my druthers, but this isn't. It's a small parcel, and the use, I think, is satisfactory for industrial. I would, personally, been in the car business. I wouldn't want, if I was a resident in that area, I wouldn't want a car lot there. I wouldn't want a drive-in theater. I wouldn't want a McDonald's. I mean, it's just one of these things that we are narrowing what can be put on this particular site. It's not as broad as the way it's zoned at this point. So I'm for the thing, and I don't really have any other comments.
Okay, Commissioner Kimsey, I think for staff. Commissioner Timms, any comments for staff?
Something other than PID? And maybe, I mean, again, brought in, it's so specific on, you can do a warehouse, a mini storage, you can do a community facility or an office flex. It's just, it's too industrial for me.
Commissioner Leo, any comments for staff?
Yeah, I would just, looking at the buffer zone, where was that page? I was just reading, here it is. Yeah, I just would like, where it refers to small-scale commercial uses and commercial uses within the buffer zone, if that could be defined a little bit. That's all my comment.
Okay. Commissioner Ohm, comments for staff?
I think I'm actually okay with the use. It's more the zoning that I'm trying to wrap around the PID. And maybe staff could create, so looking at the definition of the neighborhood buffer that it talks about, it also talks about higher intensity residential, office, and commercial. That's why I understand that the usage seems like it's lesser than what it could be. If there was a Starbucks there, how many cars would be driving through that area? And so, looking maybe trying to understand if a storage is allowed in a commercial 2 zoning, why is that? Is that because it's commercial in nature? So trying to, I guess, draw the parallels with what is this proposed use and how that really directly ties into the neighborhood buffer description. Because right now I just kind of see, I think some of us, see it as more as just self-storage as opposed to what the intent of the comp plan is. So that's my comment.
And I'd just like to echo what Commissioners Ohm and Timms made. Just that, there's this. I'm setting aside the SDP part of it because that's not really what we're hung up on right now. But taking into account the fact that the applicant wants to put a self-storage facility there, looking at the uses, I don't think mini warehouse for inside storage is necessarily a bad use within a buffer. It's those future uses that we have to think about when we're rezoning something. In 20 years, in 10 years, who knows? Maybe there's some room for almost a mixed use type of situation where maybe it becomes more economically feasible. Maybe people aren't self-storing as much, but they're self-storing some. So maybe your upper 3 levels are still self-storage, but maybe there's retail on the bottom. I don't know. It's hard to say. And locking it into this very limited usage where we're really just talking about mostly storage and a little flex space, it makes me a little nervous. I'd like to see maybe. I'd like to see if staff can explore the possibility of expanding those uses more onto the commercial side, less on the industrial side. I really think this neighborhood, in the long term, might benefit more from a commercial side buffer on this side of I-70 as opposed to looking at it as an industrial side. So that'd be my comment. So with that said, unless anybody has any other comments for staff, thank you to both staff and applicant for going through this with us, and we look forward to seeing you when we continue this in 3 weeks. We'll go ahead and move on to other business. That's the election of the officers. So, now that we're all here, since I wasn't here when I was elected last time, how did you guys handle it? It's been a while.
So we do secret ballot, right? You give us,
Yeah.
You give us little things, and then my understanding is, and Meredith will correct it, is that if you're currently the chair, you cannot be eligible for the chair again. However, the chair is eligible to be vice chair, and then the current vice chair cannot be vice chair again, but it can be chair. Is that correct?
That sounds about right to me.
What are we doing? Sorry, we were still. I thought we already voted him.
No, you did, but that was like a vacant. It was like a recess appointment.
You were gone. I know.
I know. Yeah, that happened the last time I was elected chair too. So we're not going to do that this time. We're all here. Well, you can vote that way. Meredith is very kindly tearing up some pieces of paper for us to use. So
who are we nominating?
You don't nominate. So who? Yeah.
Who wants to
vote for whoever you think would be the most best, most wonderful chair. You cannot vote for me.
Does Scott want to be president?
You can't vote for me, but you can vote for.
You can be vice president.
Well, not for chair. You can't vote for me for chair.
We're doing two positions tonight. No, we're gonna do chair first.
Yeah, we'll do chair. We'll do chair first. So just vote for chair.
Ben chair.
Now, does anybody want to make a speech?
Does anybody want to see? Yeah. Does anyone want to say anything?
Scott's gonna make a speech. Scott, have you been president?
He's been vice chair twice.
Oh well, then he needs to move up.
Okay. So please write down your votes and hand them over to me. Oh no, do we hand them to Meredith? Who do we want to okay, we hand them to Meredith. This is for chair. Yes.
In case you guys are wondering, I don't want the job.
I'd zone everything to agriculture.
Eventually, everyone gets that fine turn at the at bandwagon. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone gets a turn at the wheel, folks. So don't be shy.
Exactly.
There are no term limits on planning commission, so eventually your name will be up. All right, so.
I think I was on commission with a guy he was on the commission for like 25 years. Yeah. Ann was here for a while. All right, so Meredith, what do we got?
We have one vote for Scott.
Okay.
We have another vote for Scott.
Okay.
We have an Allen.
I did not do that.
I know. We have a Scott.
Okay.
We have another Scott.
Hmm.
We have a Weaver.
Oh no.
We have another Allen, and we have another Scott.
I thought Alan couldn't do it again.
No, Alan. Okay.
5 for Scott.
All right.
Yay, Scott.
Mr. Ohm, congratulations. You can wield this gavel at our next meeting.
2 weeks from now, in that case, yeah.
Yeah, on the continuance. I can be.
Vote for you again, right?
You can vote. I can be vice chair. The chair can become vice chair, but cannot serve 2 consecutive terms as chair. So.
Who wants to be vice chair?
So Meredith is going to rip up some more paper for us. And vice chair is actually, I just want to say this, having been vice chair and having been chair, vice chair is actually kind of a nice position because,
Like to be it?
no, I'm just saying it gets you ready to be chair at some point because you get to kind of watch and learn, and then you get thrown into the hot seat once in a while.
And usually the longer you're on it, and I think in terms of seniority, I think Ms. Weaver is coming close. I don't know.
You might be right.
I'm still new to planning commission. You guys know.
You've been here 3 years, right? At least.
Oh no, but after this meeting, I have a very funny story to tell.
Okay.
That is applicable
Oh, good.
to our work here.
All right. All right, so now we're voting for vice chair. Please write down a name of someone who you think would make a good vice chair.
It's ALAN, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's AMANDA. I know. All right, here you go, Meredith. Oh, don't walk away. Thank you. If anybody voted for me, I'm not adjourning the meeting until midnight. I just want to warn you.
All votes for Scott are nullified.
All right.
I voted for Tammy.
We have an Emery. We have an Allen. We have an Amanda. We have another Amanda.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Weaver, congratulations. All right. Vice? Actually, Vice, I don't think Vice Chair changes seats. It stays with their district, but I get to move back over with my District 1 fellow commissioner. He comes over here. I think everyone else moves around. Anyhow, you get to carry a little badge in your wallet. Yeah. Is there any other business anybody wants to bring up? Is there anything from staff you want to update us on? All right. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second that.
All right. Let's vote. Sorry, we're gonna vote. Oh, you had your chance.
Motion passed.
Janet wants to stay here all
There
night.
you go.
0.
All right. That's all of us. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.